There are some stories that refuse to fade into history, lingering like whispers in the dark. A mystery so chilling, so filled with unanswered questions, that it haunts the minds of all who hear it. This is the story of the Sodder children, 5 siblings who vanished on Christmas Eve, 1945, leaving behind a trail of eerie clues and a house reduced to ashes. Was it an accident, or something far more sinister? Stay with me as we unravel the baffling disappearance of the Sodder children. The Sodder family lived in Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jenny Sodder, along with their 10 children, were well known in their community. They lived in a 2-story timber house, filled with love and laughter. It was Christmas Eve, and the children were giddy with excitement, playing with their newly received gifts. Jenny, exhausted from the day's celebrations, decided to retire to bed early. But before she did, she allowed 5 of her children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, to stay up late, relishing the festive joy. That was the last time she would ever see them again. Around 1 a.m., Jenny was jolted awake by the ringing of the telephone. She groggily answered, only to hear a strange woman's voice laughing eerily, asking for a name she did not recognize. Shrugging it off as a prank, she returned to bed but noticed something odd. The lights were still on, and the front door was unlocked. She assumed the children had forgotten to turn them off and secured the house once more. But within minutes, a sudden sound, like a heavy object crashing onto the roof, startled her. Then, the smell of smoke filled the air. Terrified, Jenny shook George awake, and as they rushed downstairs, they saw it, flames rapidly consuming their home. The fire spread with unnatural speed, engulfing everything in its path. George and Jenny frantically gathered the children closest to them, Marion, Sylvia, and John, rushing them outside. But as George tried to go back in for the 5 remaining children, an invisible force seemed to stop him. The staircase was already crumbling, swallowed by fire. He ran outside, desperate to use his ladder to climb to the 2nd floor, but it was nowhere to be found. Odd, it was always in the same place. In sheer panic, George thought to drive his truck closer to the house to climb onto the roof, but both his trucks, which had worked perfectly earlier that day, refused to start. Someone, or something, had ensured that there was no way to save those children. The fire raged for only 45 minutes before reducing the house to rubble. The Sodders were devastated, believing their 5 children had perished in the flames. But when authorities sifted through the ashes, they found nothing. No bones. No remains. Nothing to suggest that 5 human bodies had been consumed by fire. Experts agreed that a blaze of that magnitude should have left skeletal remains behind. And yet, there was nothing. It was as if the children had vanished into thin air. In the days following the fire, eerie clues began to surface. A witness came forward claiming to have seen a group of children watching the blaze from a passing car, children who looked eerily similar to the missing Sodder kids. A local woman claimed to have served breakfast to 5 children at a diner the next morning, accompanied by strange, unrecognizable adults. Even more disturbing was a letter the Sodders received years later. It contained a photograph of a grown-up young man with an eerie resemblance to their missing son, Louis. Scrawled on the back were the words, Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Illo boys. A 90132 or 35. The cryptic message only deepened the mystery. What really happened to the Sodder children? Some believe they were kidnapped by someone with a vendetta against George Sodder, a man who was vocal in his opposition to Mussolini and had received threats from the Italian mafia. Others think the fire was deliberately set to cover up the abduction. Could the missing ladder, the disabled trucks, and the mysterious phone call all have been part of a well-orchestrated plan? And if the children were taken, who took them? And why? Despite decades of investigation, the fate of the Sodder children remains unknown. Their family never gave up searching, never lost hope that one day, they might find out the truth. But the case remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in American history. Were they taken? Were they hidden away by someone? Or did something even more sinister happen that night? The truth may forever remain buried in the ashes of that Christmas Eve, a chilling mystery lost to time. What do you think happened to the Sodder children? Were they kidnapped, or was it a tragic accident? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoy mysterious stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe, because there are many more chilling tales waiting to be uncovered. There are stories the sea keeps hidden, secrets buried beneath its waves. But some tales refuse to sink, they haunt the waters, echoing through time like whispers from the dead. Tonight, we set sail into one such chilling mystery, the ghost ship of the SS Aurang Medan. It was the late 1940s, somewhere in the vast South Pacific. The ocean stretched endlessly, its waters dark and unforgiving. The salty air carried an eerie stillness, the kind that makes seasoned sailors uneasy. Then, without warning, a distress call crackled over the radio waves. The message sent chills through the spines of those who heard it. A desperate voice, trembling with fear, transmitted these words. All officers, including the captain, are dead. Possibly whole crew dead. A pause. A breathless silence. And then, the final transmission. I die. And then, nothing. Only the whispering wind over the waves, the faint crackle of static, as if the sea itself had swallowed the voice whole. Nearby vessels picked up the transmission and quickly relayed it to authorities. The closest ship, an American merchant vessel called the Silver Star, changed course to assist. Hours passed as they cut through the waves, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. But as they approached the Aurang Medan, something felt off. The ship drifted aimlessly, its hull creaking under the weight of the waves. No signs of movement. No distress signals. Just the ghostly silence of an empty, doomed vessel. The crew of the Silver Star cautiously boarded. The moment they stepped onto the deck, an unnatural chill ran down their spines. It was as if the ship itself was holding its breath. What they found was beyond comprehension. Every single crew member of the Aurang Medan lay dead, their bodies frozen in expressions of sheer terror. Their eyes wide open, mouths twisted in silent screams, as if they had witnessed something beyond human understanding. Their limbs were contorted, their fingers curled as though clawing at something unseen. And yet, there were no visible injuries. No blood. No wounds. No sign of a struggle. Just lifeless bodies, rigid with fear. The captain was found on the bridge, his hands gripping the wheel, his face locked in a frozen grimace. The radio operator, the one who had sent the distress call, was still seated at his post, fingers resting on the telegraph, dead. His wide, unblinking eyes seemed to stare straight through those who found him. Even the ship's dog was discovered, its snarl frozen in time, as if it had been growling at something unseen. It was as if death had swept through the ship in an instant, leaving only expressions of unimaginable horror in its wake. What could have caused such a horrifying end? Some believe it was a toxic gas leak from the ship's cargo, possibly an illegal chemical weapon, something so lethal that it killed the crew instantly, leaving no trace. Others say it was a supernatural force, an ancient curse that claimed the souls of those aboard. And then there are those who whisper of something even darker, an encounter with something not of this world. Before the mystery could be unraveled, the Aurang Medan met its final fate. As the Silver Star's crew deliberated their next move, an explosion rocked the abandoned ship. A sudden, violent eruption of flames consumed the vessel entirely. Smoke billowed into the sky, and within moments, the Aurang Medan was gone, swallowed by the sea, taking its sinister secrets with it. To this day, no wreckage has ever been found. No records of its voyage exist. It is as if the ship never existed at all. A phantom vessel lost in the whispers of time. But sailors still tell the tale. And sometimes, on fog-covered nights in the South Pacific, ghostly voices are said to echo over the radio waves, a desperate, trembling voice repeating that final, chilling message. I die. And then, silence. The sea never forgets, and neither should we. If you ever find yourself sailing the vast, lonely ocean, and you hear a voice crackling through the radio, whispering words from the abyss, ask yourself, do you really want to answer? Because some messages are never meant to be heard. Some voices belong to the dead. And some stories should remain lost beneath the waves. It was a bitterly cold night, the kind where the wind howled through the trees like a warning, rattling against the windows of Mark's small suburban home. He had always enjoyed the quiet of his neighborhood, the predictable rhythm of life. But tonight, that silence carried something unsettling. A deep unease that settled in his chest for no apparent reason. Mark sat in his living room, the glow of his television casting shadows across the walls. It was nearly midnight when the sound came, a knock at the front door. He frowned, glancing at the clock. Who would be visiting at this hour? Another knock, slow and deliberate. A strange chill crept down his spine as he approached the door. Peering through the peephole, he saw two figures standing just beyond the porch light's reach. Their heads were tilted downward, their faces obscured by the shadows. A hesitant voice, barely above a whisper, called out. "Mister, we need to come in. It's cold. Please." Mark hesitated. Something about the voice felt wrong, flat, emotionless. Against his better judgment, he cracked the door open slightly. The porch light flickered, and for the first time, he saw them clearly. Two children stood before him, a boy and a girl, no older than 10. Their skin was unnaturally pale, their clothes slightly outdated as if they had stepped out of another time. But it was their eyes that made Mark's breath hitch in his throat. Solid black. No whites, no pupils. Just endless, inky darkness. Every instinct in Mark's body screamed at him to shut the door, to lock it and never look back. But he couldn't move. He felt like he was sinking, like their gaze was pulling him under. "Please let us in. We won't hurt you." The boy's voice was almost hypnotic, a quiet hum that made Mark's thoughts blur. His hand trembled on the doorknob. He wanted to say no. He wanted to slam the door. But his body wasn't listening. The girl stepped forward, and the temperature seemed to drop. Mark could see his own breath now, misting in the air. The lights inside flickered. "Just for a moment, we need to call our parents," she pleaded. A sudden surge of clarity shot through Mark. No. This wasn't right. He yanked the door shut, bolting it and stumbling backward. The knocking started again, harder this time. More insistent. "Please. Let us in." He backed away, heart hammering, reaching for his phone. But the screen was black. No signal. The power in the house flickered and then died, plunging everything into darkness. The knocking stopped. Silence. Mark's breath came in shallow gasps as he waited, his ears straining for any sound. Minutes felt like hours. Then, a whisper. Right outside the window. "We'll come back, when you're ready." The porch light flickered once more, casting an eerie glow across the empty doorstep. They were gone. But Mark knew. They would return.